at the United Nations Office of the Special Advisor on Africa. And I'm also a former member of the government of Seychelles. And so I remember fondly past experiences at the UNGA. And I know how difficult it is for all delegations to be able to be everywhere all at once. And we appreciate the understanding of everyone that we will have different speakers who may be arriving at different times, including Commissioner Bankole, who will be joining us a little bit later, as well as some of the other speakers. And this has meant we may need to slightly adjust our program, but we appreciate immensely everyone's engagement and partnership. We are very pleased to have this event with the Institute for Security Studies, and I'm joined here by Dr. David Johannes, who is representing the Regional Director for East Africa. And welcome, David, and thank you very much for partnering with us for this very timely analysis. And I'm also delighted to have with us His Excellency Mr. Neville Gertz, the Ambassador and Permanent Representative to the United Nations from the Republic of Namibia, and the co-facilitator for the Summit of the Future. And I think before we start, we should first of all give a round of applause and congratulations to Namibia for being a key partner again. And this is the gentleman. Your Excellencies, partners and friends, I would like, first of all, on behalf of the United Nations family, to convey our appreciation for the able leadership and stewardship provided by Namibia in the process to produce the Pact for the Future. Undoubtedly, this pact may not tick all of the boxes in terms of what African countries want. But in this era of significant geopolitical tensions, the agreement has brought about the pact. The agreement that has brought about the Pact for the Future should not be underestimated. We need a new form of multilateralism built around people-centered development. We are aiming for global transformation, and this transformation will succeed or fail depending on how well we can unlock the opportunity for Africa. Our Under-Secretary General has often said, the Africa we want is the Africa the world needs. The ambition of the Pact is closely aligned with the ambition of Agenda 2063. And as we reflect on its key provisions, we must also seek to implement the tools that will allow us to deliver results for African citizens. Allow me in the Global South and in the Global North. The elimination of harmful subsidies.
On behalf of Dr. Paul Simon Handy, Regional Director, East Africa, and representative of the African Union for the Institute for Security Studies, I would like to welcome you to this seminar, which seeks to reflect on the implication of the Pact for the Future for the African continent. This seminar follows the ISS sustained engagement in the preparations and broader aspirations behind the Summit of the Future, namely reinvigorating multilateralism and enhancing international cooperation. ISS has been engaging in efforts to generate a broad range of views and perspectives on the development of the new agenda for peace. And as one of the few African organizations that provided written submissions to the new agenda for peace, our analysis contributed to creating greater awareness of the new agenda for peace and amplifying African perspectives ahead of the negotiations on the Pact for the Future. ISS has conducted a series of consultations to raise greater awareness of the new agenda for peace, inform discussions on critical aspects of the zero draft of the Pact and successive ones, and ultimately shape Africa's preparation for the Summit of the Future. These engagements include several workshops and seminars organized in cooperation with our partners, including the United Nations Office of the African Union, the New York University Center on International Cooperation, and with members of the AU network of think tanks for peace, the Need for Peace. In collaboration with UN OSAA, our partner for today's seminar, we also convened a gathering of the diplomatic community in Addis Ababa to expand the discussion beyond the New York-based audience. It's to offer an opportunity for reflection on some of the Pact's critical outcomes, exploring their implication for the continent's peace and security, governance, socio-economic development, and uplifting Africa's standing in the global arena. It will also explore how Africa can leverage the Pact's outcome and decisions to address its multifaceted challenge. So we have distinguished speakers who will share their perspectives on key outcomes of the summit, the repercussion for peace and security on the continent especially. Once again, the Institute for Security Studies would like to sincerely thank the UN OSAA for partnering with us on this important seminar, and we look forward to continuing collaboration in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dawit, and thank you for sharing those perspectives and also for accompanying us throughout this process. I'd also like to just acknowledge some of the high-level participants from the UN system who have also joined us. We have the Assistant Secretary General of UNHCR, Mr. Rauf Mazou. Thank you very much for being with us. And we also have Ms. Ugochin Daniels, the Deputy Director General of IOM.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, dear friends, a word that is used frequently in the news these days is Gaza, where we are focusing our attention on what is going on with the people of Palestine in Gaza. Now, I'm using Gaza to help you pronounce my last name once and for all. My last name is Herze, and it is very close to Gaza. So if you rather call me Gaza, that is okay with me. But for a long time I've been called Mr. Neville Gertz here at the UN. I don't know whether it's because the sound is too harsh, but it's my great pleasure to help you pronounce my name from today onwards. We have just concluded a milestone event, and I think we can certainly say that by no means this is no small feat for the United Nations, for the international community to have come together in the manner that we did to produce this historic pact for the future. But I think we must keep in mind and ask the question, to form a more harmonious unit that could share the Earth's resources and its potential and its opportunities on a more equal basis and with shared interest and concern. But perhaps the most important one was we wanted to turbocharge the implementation of the SDGs. Because it is through strengthened implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals that we will truly make an impact and improving the lives of billions of people around our globe. Certainly, the Pact for the Future aimed to address the reforms needed for institutions and for the sustainability of our habitat and development for present and future generations. Our leaders have now achieved a significant milestone by adopting 3 critical agreements designed to safeguard the well-being of future generations, following a series of complex and challenging negotiations. Though not without flaws, the Pact for the Future, the Global Digital Compact, and the Declaration on Future Generations lay a vital foundation for action. I might be remembered after this process as somebody who's brought in some African wisdom into the process, where I've sometimes had to dig in to get inspiration from our ancestors. And there we have been taught that too much discussion will lead to quarrel. And this had almost reached the point where we had opened the discussion way too much, to the point where it almost bordered on the brink of a quarrel. But in the end, sanity and wisdom prevailed, and I believe all the delegations today can celebrate that we have shown that there is still hope in this world for us to come together when it matters. Now, in response to mounting global pressures, Member States chose the path of collaboration. The successful conclusion of these three landmark agreements after intense and difficult discussions underscores the commitment of the majority of the UN Member States to find common ground despite ongoing conflict, polarization and distrust. Now that the complex negotiations are behind us, the real impact of the Pact will rest on Member States and other key actors to proceed with vigor and ambition to advance the most consequential proposals and reforms. A sustained effort by Member States with leadership from both the global South and North will be crucial for success. However, this can only be achieved if broader constituencies such as academia, civil society, the private sector, and individual citizens commit to working together. Chapter focus on building partnership and mobilizing financial resources that is crucial for advancing infrastructure projects, health systems, and educational initiatives. It also emphasizes Africa's role in global governance and decision-making processes, ensuring the continent's voice is heard on the international stage. So, dear friends, each chapter of the Pact for the Future addresses core issues vital to Africa's development. By focusing on peace, sustainability, inclusive growth, digital transformation and partnerships, the Pact aligns with Africa's priorities, fostering progress toward the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This holistic approach can empower African nations to overcome structural challenges to unlock our potential for sustainable and inclusive growth. We know that a global summit doesn't change anything on its own, but it does create space for action. What matters now is whether Member States and others work with energy and ambition to take forward the most significant proposals and reforms. A sustained Member State coalition with leadership from both South and North will be essential to delivery, but will only succeed if wider constituencies such as academia, civil society, business, citizens put their shoulder to the wheel as well. As the UN reaches its 80th anniversary in 2025, we need progress at every milestone ahead of the official follow-up meeting in 2028, starting with the financing for development next year, where we shall continue to build on the outcomes of the Pact and further strengthen where we may still feel we have fallen short. The road has just begun to lead us to a more prosperous future, I think.
As an office in OSAA, we realized as the process was going on that utilizing the AI where we are today, we had to come up with a comparative presentation to unpack both the Pact for the Future as well as the second year implementation plan of Agenda 2063. And we called that exercise a shared vision for the future, Africa's Agenda 2063 and the Pact for the Future. We looked at the interconnectedness of the two frameworks, which, as already Ambassador has alluded, had a lot of interlinkages that intersect between the Agenda 2063 and the Pact for the Future. I will highlight a few of the intersections that we were able to identify utilizing the artificial intelligence technology today. First, it was the connection between the two, the intersection on poverty, eradication, and sustainable development. Both agendas envision a prosperous Africa with a high standard of living in both Agenda 2063 as well as the Pact for the Future. Climate change and environmental stewardship was the second intersection that we identified. And number 3 was financing for development, which we are all, both agendas recognize that financial resources are essential for achieving transformative change and emphasize the innovative financing mechanisms.
The framework and the answers to the questions that we are asking ourselves, which I believe it's very important. But as we all know, this is not the first time we've had good intentions. We've had several good intentions in the past. And so the first panel increasingly emphasized the fact that implementation, resting on all stakeholders and various actors, will make the difference going forward. But that also depends on how we unpack the Pact and how we make the Pact relevant to the context, particularly of Africa, that we all are engaged with. And so this session will really be looking at how are we unpacking the Pact and what does it mean in terms of implication for the continent of Africa. And so I have a couple of distinguished people who will be speaking and some requests from the floor, which I will grant going forward. Ambassador Bankole will join us. He's attending another meeting. And so he will join us to speak on the strategic priorities from the perspective of the review of the peace building architecture. And then we will also look at the implication of PSOs by Professor Dekone. And then Dr. Kombe will also address aspects of the pathways when it comes to building and sustaining peace on the African continent,
including the upcoming strategic review of the African Standard Rules. I will organize my thoughts along 3 observations. Firstly, the need to shape and refine Africa's own approach to peace support operations, born out of the African context and experience. Secondly, learning from this experience to improve the effectiveness of African peace support operations, including via the review of the African Standby Force, and strengthening the ability to undertake multidimensional peace support operations. And thirdly, the need to shape Africa's strategic partnerships, including the operationalization of Resolution 2719, without weakening African agency in the process. So first, the need to shape and refine Africa's own approach to peace support operations. The African Union now has more than 20 years of experience with deploying and managing peace support operations, with more than 20 operations undertaken over this period. In addition to AU-led peace operations, there has also been several operations undertaken by regional economic communities like ECOWAS, SADC, and the East African Community, and other regional bodies such as the G5 Sahel and the Lake Chad Basin Commission. Based on these experiences, the African Union has developed its own peace support operations doctrine, and one is now able to identify an African approach to peace support operations that differ in important ways from the United Nations peace plan. The Pact of the Future echoes the recommendations made in the new Agenda for Peace for the United Nations to undertake a comprehensive review of the future of all forms of UN peace operations. Such a review will have to consider, amongst others, the relationship between UN peace operations and African peace support operations, and make recommendations to the UN regarding how it should manage the relationship from a UN perspective. I would recommend that the African Union, in light of the strategic partnership with the United Nations,
and I really just want to build on some of the points that that Professor already made, because he did underscore that focusing on on peacekeeping and peace operations without addressing the root causes and the drivers of conflict becomes a challenge. And may I please bring the apologies of our Assistant Secretary General Elizabeth Speha, who would have really wished to be here today, but was called this morning to attend a meeting that wasn't within her capacity to say no when your boss asks you to go. And so I bring really her apologies and acknowledge my senior colleagues that I see at the back, who work very closely with IOM and UNHCR, doing a fantastic job representing those whose voices who are forced to move from their homes. So again, look forward to hearing your contributions. So we will focus from the Peace Building Support Office on 3 areas, really, just trying to unpack Chapter 2 and Chapter 5 of the Pact of the Future, and looking at how we can then move some of those recommendations forward. And I think we heard from the remarks that were made from the Ambassador of Namibia, from my brother from ISS, Dr. there, the points that he made and others who contributed so far. So in our view, we believe very strongly that the Pact, as the Secretary General, when we use the Secretary General's words, at the opening of the Summit of the Future, the Pact really was about bringing multilateralism back from the brink. And we know that multilateralism has been under threat for a long time. So even just the fact of having the Pact there on its own has been instrumental. And we're very pleased that it gives a very high profile to dialogue, to diplomacy, to prevention, to peace building, and to sustaining peace, but also links it to the Sustainable Development Goals.
Member states. I think we're all aware of the fact that forced displacement is one of the most serious global challenges that the world is currently experiencing. We have about 120 million displaced around the world, forcibly displaced around the world, refugees and internally displaced persons, and about 46 million of them are on the African continent, and that makes a little bit more than 40%. Now, talking about refugees and the Pact. In the Pact, and allow me to read specifically what is mentioned in the Pact, member states committed to address the root causes of forced and protracted displacement, including the mass displacement of populations, and implement and facilitate access to durable solutions for internally displaced persons, refugees, and stateless persons, including through equitable international burden and responsibility sharing, and support host communities and with full respect for the principle of no-homophobia. And that is, in reading that and in making reference to that, I have to also acknowledge the very important role that the African group played in having this inserted in the Pact. This instrument and the previous instrument that have been developed, whether it is the Agenda 2063 that was mentioned earlier, or the Global Compact on refugees, or the 2 conventions, because the African continent is the continent which has advanced the most when it comes to dealing with internal displacement and refugees. All these instruments are allowing us to make sure that refugees are well protected. One important point that I would also like to raise, and it has been raised earlier, it's the fact that prevention is the most important thing. When we talk about forced displacement, what we would want is more efforts on prevention and more efforts on conflict resolution to make sure that we find solutions to the situation of displacement. And the Pact makes clear reference to the importance of enhancing prevention.
My colleague and brother in appreciating the organizers for convening this event. I also appreciate all of the presentations by previous speakers. And I'm also especially pleased for IOM to have this opportunity to speak, because the Pact for the Future presents significant opportunities, obviously, for Africa, particularly in enhancing the resilience of communities
against the impact of climate change and fostering sustainable development. And speaking specifically, in the first chapter of the Pact on Sustainable Development, and it calls on member states and obviously all of the countries represented here to maximize the positive contribution of migrants to sustainable development of the countries of origin, transit, destination, and host countries, to strengthen international partnerships and regional global cooperation for safe, orderly, and regular migration, to comprehensively address drivers of irregular migration and ensure the safety, dignity, and human rights of all migrants, regardless of their migration status. There are equally similar texts and references in the Declaration on Future Generations. And so the Pact, as well as the SDG Summit Declaration, anchor the positive contributions of migration in sustainable development. We see that key to securing Africa's future lies in preparing its growing youth population, as 60% of the total population of the continent, to face the development challenges. And we see a new dynamic phenomenon in migration characterized by shifting patterns and emerging trends. Less than 1% of the region's population leaves the continent, a figure significantly below the global average for intercontinental migration. And we know that African countries are countries of origin, of transit, and destination. This is often overlooked in the political discussions on migration, but offers huge potential for the continent.
And I'm very proud to listen to the Pact of the Future. And I guess my question is, as youth, what can we do to ensure that we can implement and execute some of the strategies that we're able to implement? And as a member of the civil society, what can I do as a takeaway to ensure that we implement that and we get the Africa we want, and also the Africa that the youth, because we are here and we are about to, take on the next chapter. So that's my question, and thank you so much.
719, all of that is very relevant and we must do. The question that I now have is, from your perspective, remember that civil society and at all levels, all tracks, have been so critical in getting us to the future. The views that we got that were refused to member states for us to be able to negotiate. For the continent, at least what we got, and we able to make sure that those issues are in. So how do we now move together as member states, still together with civil society, to make sure that we implement? What are your thoughts in terms of concretely, how should we play it? Thank you.
We are taking out 1, 2, 3 things that we can say are the concrete elements that Africa stands to gain from this particular pact. We are also saying that ABC is what we can do to ensure that Africa maximizes those gains, and perhaps is there going to be a time that we are going to reflect 1, 2 years down the line whether we are on the right track. Thank you so much.
In New York, we speak a lot about multilateralism, but on the streets of New York, they don't even know the SDGs is not a top of the Pact. Right there on 2nd Avenue or 3rd Avenue, you can ask anyone. They will not understand, except those who have badges like us. So, our challenge is to ground our countries in the national development space. What do I mean? And to translate that into global support for our national interests. In between, you have the space for regional and continental interface. That's the first fact I want to give so that you understand. Unpacking the path for the future, I'm not pessimistic, I'm an incurable optimist. But it's not going to change Sahel. It's not going to change the state of development tomorrow on our continent. But it has given us signposts. I think this is a fact. Pact for the future, the Declaration on the Youth, and the Global Compact. They are landmark, historic, multilateral instruments to change our world. But the solution lies in
for the opportunity, and thank you so much to the organizers for this brilliant event. My question is a very brief one, and it's addressed to the Honorable Commissioner Bankole. I just want to speak to, my name is Uyo Yanwamfai, and I'm from the United Nations Counterterrorism Committee's Executive Directorate. Across the field of counterterrorism, as well as general sort of conflict, one of the challenges that we see across the board are issues relating to maybe exclusion of youth and lack of proper integration of women's issues into national development frameworks. What would you say, from your experience, can be done practically to ensure that there is space for youth to be properly integrated into some of the day-to-day activities at the national level, to ensure that their needs are addressed and their perspectives are brought to the fore? And the same goes for women, because very often, sometimes the issue is that there's not enough space for women's issues to be incorporated. So how do we practically bring this into the forefront? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is what are the processes that are taking place, work that's being taken place to implement and operationalize the recent Security Council resolution on AU-led missions? There are some challenges, of course, being anticipated, but what are the key issues that you're taking? What are the actual activities that are currently taking place to operationalize it? Thank you very much.
Yeah, the African youth here in the diaspora. First of all, congratulations for putting this event together, and really want to address my question to the Commissioner. He emphasizes on the importance of involving youth in the security and issues prevention. And my question to him is, just like Matthew said earlier, what are the measures that are taken for making sure
as being the only youth here? Some of the ideas that we can implement is next year for the next UNGA having more youth representative of even years, so we can actually collaborate amongst ourselves, and even to do that as a statement.
Thank you. Very reassuring. Please.
Domesticate the Pact of the Future in the African Union. I know that it is not an African Union agenda, or it is a global agenda, but then domesticating it in the African Union, especially perhaps the part that involves international peace and security, is an important thing to do, I believe, and then also cascading it down to national levels, I believe, would also be an important thing to do. So I'm asking the Commissioner if there is something we should look forward to on the part of the African Union to domesticating the Pact of the Future. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we will close
for delivery of this particular pact. But remember, it's not the first pact we've had. We've had the pact, the compact on migration. It's not working. That is why my hunch is to push for the domestication of this pact. And I'll read you just one of the commitments made by the international community 3-4 days ago when the pact was adopted. Unfortunately, it was not unanimous. They had to go to a vote. what is now a pact. Action 7. We will strengthen our efforts to build peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. That means the youth, the women that have been neglected over the years will have to be part and parcel of this whole of government approach, whole of society approach. So it's a very, very tough endeavor. But let me just quickly respond to the first question. And I would suggest that we look at specific experiences from the African Union. I told you we have the tools. As we speak, we are just rolling out what we call the wise youth. We had the panel of the wise, old men and women, of course, wise men and women, but very old, like me, okay? With no experience in how the youth feel. Our days were different. In the university, we were given bursary awards. We paid zero, virtually zero fees in the university. We joined the public service, we got free, virtually free loan, car loan. All that disappeared. So we are living in a different world. It is not the same world. And we have to let the youth know they can also aspire to those benefits from government. Efficient manner. We should never stop conversing with the youth of the women. The women agenda started in Nigeria in the 1990s. It has gone well. Today, South Africa, Rwanda have almost more female in parliament than many African countries. It's doable when we keep the messaging clear. For the last one from my colleague in Addis Ababa, certainly we must engage to domesticate within the, or Africanized, as Dr. Stanley said, Secretary General of the UN, that we will work with the EU to have a working group to unpack the path for the future. So, colleagues, friends, let me assure you that the African Union is yours. We stand at a time of history, and we believe that in the future, the path for the future, when it's reviewed in about 5 years or so, give us the opportunity for a change. I thank you so much.
I think Ambassador has done justice to almost all the questions. So I would like to just give 30 seconds to the other speakers in case you have any parting shots. No, you okay your time? Okay. Thank you very much. That helps us. I think in wrapping up, this is the beginning of a conversation. It's difficult to have all the answers, but it's important to have questions in the beginning, because that's the only way we can unpack where we need to go. But most importantly, as it's coming to implementation, is the only thing that will make the pact for the future different from other intentions.
One of them.